Well, hi. I'm Corey from Path of Friendship, and welcome back to another Mindful Mutt Moments. Today we have Cecil here, who's it's kind of his nap time. As you can see, he's just crushing into me here. So at Mindful Mutt Moments, we take a few moments every day to really just connect with our dogs in a present moment way, in a mindful way, without any agendas, without any goals, just being together as friends and being centered in the moment, the way our dogs experience the world. As you've heard me say this, if you've been watching these every single time, but it's important because this is really how they experience things. Yeah. And to really be friends, we have to connect on the same level. I can't be up here and my dogs can't be down here. There's no connection, or the other way around either. It's only when we're equal that we make that connection there. And so I can get my attention focused on the present moment. It's hard for me to get their attention focused on way in the future or way in the past. Their brains aren't really set up the same as ours. We have a much greater capacity for abstract thought and imagination. And so really, the future is imaginary. There is no future. It's all present. But we can imagine it and predict it, and that's what makes our brains unique in that way. But our dogs are much better skilled at engaging with and connecting with the present moment, which is what mindfulness is. So we can really do both. So can't bring them to our level. We have to bring ourselves up to their level as far as being connected and mindful at the moment. So as we've done all the time in these, it's just a matter of using anchor points to anchor us to the present moment. And traditionally, breathing, paying attention to our breath is an anchor point. Feel how it feels in our body. And what we've done in Mindful Mutt Moments is we pet them and feel how our dogs feel under the palms of our hands and engage with them and how they sound. Cecil makes a lot of these noises, and how they smell. And I know sometimes that may not be pleasant, but part of being mindful is not judging it. It's kind of experiencing everything as if you were someone from another planet, that you really didn't know if things were good or bad. You're just experiencing it right now. What is it, without making judgments or evaluations on it? Sort of like an empirical scientist. An empirical scientist is not going to judge. They're just going to observe. And it's all about observation. And we're observing how we feel and how our dogs feel now. I can't observe him yesterday, and I can't observe him tomorrow, because if I do it tomorrow, it'll be now. So mindfulness is about observing, being observant in the present, which is where our dogs live. And in addition to making that connection, which is critical to a good friendship, there are a lot of uses for it from a personal standpoint and from our dog standpoint. There's a concept or a term in Buddhism where a lot of mindfulness comes from. Mindfulness comes from really across the board in different cultures and philosophies and religions. But Buddhism is the one that sort of comes to mind when people say it. But there's a term called the kleshas. Klesha is the sort of phonetic pronunciation, kleshas. And kleshas, the real meaning of the word is poisons. And the poisons, what they're poisoning is your experience. And so what those poisons are, they're sort of these strong runaway emotions that take over. So we've all experienced it, right? You've been in traffic, or you're driving behind, you're trying to get somewhere and you're driving behind somebody, and they're going really slowly, and then you decide to change lanes and they change lanes in front of you, and you could feel that anger or that tension or that frustration build, and it just keeps going on. And eventually that emotion, almost like this evil demon, takes over and takes us out of our composed state and our present moment state, and we get lost in it. That's known as a klesha. Or it could be fear. We could be get into these sort of panic kind of things where, normal concern is fine. If I'm standing in a road and a car's coming at me, that concern is very useful. But panic is not. Panic, there's no processing in there. And that's also a klesha. And part of what mindfulness, when I teach mindfulness with people, when I do my work with people with PTS and things like that, we work on how if those kleshas, how it feels in our body. We begin to observe in the present moment what takes place without judging it. We're not going to say that it's bad to panic or bad to be angry or bad of these things. We're just going to say, how does it feel? And by noticing it and understanding the different how it feels, whether it's centered in our stomachs or in our shoulders, or everybody's unique in that, we can begin to sense it coming on, and then we have the ability to make the choice. Do we want to run with it? Sometimes we do. Or do we want to maybe try something different? When it comes with mindfulness with our dogs are prone to kleshas too. Yes, they are much better at being mindful than we are, because that's the way their brains are set up, but they're not immune to emotions. And anybody who has a dog who, say, is reactive on a leash to other dogs, let's say, for example, which is a pretty common thing, you can see that those kleshas, those emotions in progress, right? You see that you're walking with him, and all of a sudden, maybe they see the other dog first, or you see it, and all of a sudden they notice it, and their ears perk up. And now it's starting. And so you try to stop it, but boy, that klesh is like that hook, and it's like that, it grabs them, and it begins to pull them, and it builds and builds and builds, and that the emotions come out, and the barking, and if you've had a dog or have seen a dog who's emotional on the end of a leash with other dogs or things, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, a lot of the popular ways of changing that, I see this all the time. Even in my own neighborhood, when I'm walking, I see one person, you try to get the dog to stop, and you take out a treat, and you focus the treat, and say, hey, you want this? So what you're doing is you're taking the attention point away from the dog, the initial thing, and you're bringing the attention to something else. It's not bad, but you're not getting the dog to actually work with it. What you're doing is you're ignoring, or you're distracting your dog from the trigger. See, kleshas are often brought on by triggers. We all have triggers, and sometimes our triggers are not even aware. We're aware. Have you ever met somebody, or even if you've never knew them before, you meet somebody, and just something in the back of your mind is like, I don't like this person. Or the other way around, oh, I do like this person. Well, there might be some kind of movement or facial expression or something about them is triggering one of those kleshas in you, one of those emotions in you. They're probably very innocent. It probably is very illogical that you have that, because they could be the greatest person in the world, but there's something either visual or what they sounded, or it could be something more subtle as a scent that triggers that. And our dogs are susceptible to these triggers as well. And these triggers, especially these kleshas, what they do is they activate the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight kind of adrenaline-based reaction. So when we take out a treat and we try to show them a treat, what we're trying to do is say, well, you have a choice between that trigger or this trigger. It works sometimes. The problem that I have with that is it never allows our dogs to deal with it. If every time I get upset with something, all I have to do, if I'm constantly distracting, I've never learned to process and integrate some of those feelings. And so what I like to do with my dogs is, and they've had triggers, well, maybe not Cecil here. This is pretty active for Cecil. But my dog Bodhi, have you seen, or Bhakti, as you've seen, or many dogs that I've worked with over the years, I like to get them to learn to integrate it and relax with it. And a lot of these mindful things that we're doing, like the petting, and we'll be getting into massage and things like that, are ways of getting them to recognize those emotions and those kleshas and begin to process it, rather than just distracting them from it. By the way, I've also seen the other. I've seen people where their dogs have been really upset and they give them really firm corrections or punishment. You're just replacing one clasher with another. You're still in that sympathetic nervous system state of adrenaline. You're just replacing fear with another fear, or fear with another anger, or things like that. And that's really not effective either. Remember, it's not about the control. Because those, whether it's the carrot or the stick, those are two forms of control. And there's an educator, Alfie Kohn, once said, between a carrot and stick, you usually find a jackass. And I don't think of my dogs as that. I think, not to insult jackasses or donkeys or things, that they're wonderful, but I like my dogs as dogs. Anyway, so getting them to sort of process it and use some of these calming, mindful things, you're actually replacing those triggers with what's known in polyvagal theory as a glimmer. And a glimmer is basically just a trigger for connection. A glimmer is when fear is triggered, you have that sort of threat system activated, and the adrenaline flows, and all those muscles tense up, and they go into this fight or flight. Or extreme fear, it's actually a shutdown. Everything kind of goes boom, shutting down. But what a glimmer, when you're trying to activate a connection, you're bringing it all the way up to the ventral vagal nerve, where the oxytocin is released, and that sort of calming, connective friendship is released. And that's what I think is the best way to approach trying to have your dogs process those triggers, deactivate those triggers, and you're doing that through connection. It doesn't happen 1, 2, 3. But what it does do is it allows our dogs to not always have to put blinders on and don't look at it kind of thing, which is really what the other methods do. And what this does is it allows our dogs to learn to see it and say, I see it, and breathe through it and process it in a different way. Not consciously like we would do. But by the way, that is a way of us working. When we see something, we need to breathe through that, take a moment to relax and reconnect. And we can reconnect with the moment, with somebody else. That helps us as well. And through mindfulness, it's a really great way of going about that. But with our dogs, what we want to do is we want to look for and help them find these glimmers, these connecting points. So when I'm mindful with them and I'm petting them, even this touch, even these soft, calm touching, or my voice, or the different kind of head massage that we had done, or other things, all these things, these are these positive triggers or glimmers that activate the connection system in them. And you can't have adrenaline and that oxytocin, that calming thing together. It's like having hot water and cold water. You can't have them in the same place. They neutralize each other. And so what this does is it helps neutralize them. And this is only done through the connective, the mindful connection that we can have with our friends, with our dogs here. So in thinking about doing these mindful moments, there are uses for them. Although I like them for their own sake. Mindfulness is like listening to music. I'm not going to listen to music just so I can do something different later, use it for something later. I listen to it for the enjoyment as I'm listening to it. However, with mindfulness, it's that way. But however, you can make use of it also in other ways by learning or getting your dogs to learn to deal with these kleshas, these runaway emotions that really kind of distract from enjoying life. Now, as I mentioned, Cecil here, I don't know if he's ever had one because this is pretty much what he does, but it's a good thing to try. So spend the time with your dog every day to get that connection there. The more you do it, the more intertwined and solid and connected you're going to be with your dog, and the more you can help each other deal with some of these emotions, deal with some of these stressful times, especially now that we're going through with this pandemic where everybody's stressed. Being with our dogs, the connection is what really kind of can help us with that. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to just change everything like a light switch, but it's a wonderful way to begin to just enjoy being friends. And after all, that's really why we have our dogs. They are our friends. And we need to treat them as such. So, if I can wake up Cecil, I'll have him say thank you. So, thank you, and keep this in mind and be mindful. Deep breath in, deep breath out, relax, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.